What if I told you that getting lean has nothing to do with willpower and everything to do with trust? I lost 40 pounds, I ran multiple half marathons, went from doing no pull-ups to now a pull-up PB of over 10. I'm so proud of that one. Building my YouTube channel to over 100,000 subscribers and a coaching company where we help hundreds of clients like every single year. And yet I can't even remember the 5-digit code to my house and I cry over my kids' socks on the ground. So if you've ever wondered how to build consistent routines, stop binging on the weekends, say no to junk food and to eat those potatoes and broccoli even when you don't want to, aka willpower, then here's how. And here's where most people get this wrong and why 95% of people will not lose weight and then actually keep it off. They think that willpower is a precursor to success as opposed to an output of taking action. Let me explain. People ask me all the time, how do you stay motivated? How do you stop self-sabotaging? How do you go to the gym consistently or do something longer than a couple of weeks? And I get it because I've been there. When I was 19 is when I started dieting. And I remember going to Argentina for the first time. It was the first time that I was out of my home environment and I gained about 20 pounds in the course of 6 months. When I came home from that is when I really started to get serious about trying to lose weight, and everything I did was very intense in the amount of willpower that I would need to sustain it. I remember writing down all my goals, talking about how much weight I was going to lose in a certain amount of time, writing out how many calories I was going to eat every day. I'd make goals and I'd set rewards for myself. Like if I lose 2 pounds this week, then I'll be able to go to my friend's house or have some other kind of random reward. I'm so sad to say this, but I would spend hours on Tumblr, if anyone remembers Tumblr, looking at thin girls and trying to be motivated to go to bed hungry so that I could lose the weight. And the longest stint that I ever did was when I went to Australia when I was about 21 and nobody knew me. And I remember up until that point, I had not been vegan, but I had found some influencers online who were vegan and they had abs. So I was like, well, you know what? I want to do this. And so I told everyone in the flat that I was staying that I was vegan, and that was all they knew of me. It was a chance for me to come into a new environment and completely reinvent myself. So I started running every single day. I would get up at 5 a.m. I would run for about an hour. I would have my tiny portion that I had weighed out. I had so many conflicting ideas about how I needed to lose weight. But the thing that they all had in common, the calorie counting, the low carb, the vegan diet, everything that I did required so much restriction and so much effort. Most nights I would actually go to bed hungry and I would need to go to bed at about 8 p.m. because my stomach was growling so much and I was so tired all the time. Inevitably, at some point within the week, I would have a colossal binge. We're talking half a loaf of bread, all the jam, all the peanut butter, all of the highest calorie foods that I could think of. And then I would instantly feel so shameful and terrible. And I would spend another hour looking at thin girls, trying to willpower myself into not making the same mistakes again. It's even crazy to look back and think that I was able to maintain this cycle for about 3 months. And I did lose weight. I think I lost between 10 and 15 pounds over this time. And maybe you can see where this story is going. And I don't know exactly what I expected, but there was a point in time, and it was around Christmas, where I decided to give myself a little bit more leeway. I remember distinctly being at an event and there was some cheesecake there. And I was like, you know what? I've lost all this weight. I've been really good. I'm just gonna have a little bit. That one piece of cheesecake spiraled me into 3 months of weight gain. And all the willpower that I had been using and white knuckling up until that point was just completely gone. Not only did I gain weight after that 3-month period, I actually continued to lose and then gain and lose and then gain, alternating between needing so much motivation and so much willpower to then giving up and inevitably losing all of the progress that I'd gained. The cycle went on for over a decade, and every single time that I gave up, every time that I started a diet and I tried so hard and I couldn't sustain those actions, I felt like a total failure. I felt completely broken, to the point where I started to believe that my metabolism must be broken because weight loss felt so difficult for me and I always had to have so much restriction. And the reason that I stayed stuck in this cycle for so long was that I thought I needed to have willpower first. And that's how I was going to do all of these difficult things, as opposed to what I understand now, which is that you just need to have trust because of retrospective evidence and repetition that when you make promises to yourself, you can keep your word. The only thing that creates willpower is trust through evidence. But more importantly, because we can only have trust in ourselves through consistent action, if we want to have consistent action to therefore create trust, we have to almost eliminate the need for willpower in the first place. We need to build habits that don't rely on willpower because we have trust in our habits to stay consistent regardless of how we feel of them. And that's how you create sustained results, because you're able to put actions that lead to the outcomes you want, like weight loss, like building a business, like running a marathon, because you have trust and evidence that those things are just habits and part of who you are and your identity. And so when you're looking at achieving a goal that requires willpower or requires you doing something that is uncomfortable, you have the evidence that when you say you are going to do something, you're going to be able to do that. And humans are hardwired to choose the path of least resistance. We are hardwired to build habits that are easy, obvious, satisfying. So if we don't work with how our brains actually create habits, then it doesn't matter how much willpower you have, it doesn't matter how much trust you have, you're going to struggle to maintain any kind of effort long term because you don't have the habits to support it. And I remember when all of this changed for me. I was 40 pounds heavier than I am now, 3 months postpartum with my second daughter Morgan, and I had gained a lot of weight during my pregnancy, and I had not lost all the weight that I had gained with my first daughter, Riley, even though I had done so much white knuckling between those two pregnancies. And at that time, we were house sitting for some people. We had just come back from Thailand. Nick had to quit his job due to his MS progressing. We were trying to start a business. We were also on the government benefit. It was winter, it was dark, it was cold. And I distinctly remember holding my 3-year-old daughter, probably covered in vomit because she used to vomit everywhere all the time, feeling my body feel so not my own, feeling so trapped, my joints aching, thinking, how am I going to reverse this? How am I going to get back to even feeling like myself? I don't even know myself anymore. And I remember thinking, there's no way that I can do another raw diet. There is no way that I can count calories again. With the circumstances that I have, I just can't do it. And I had this thought that I'd never had up until that point, which was, if I put in all this effort and I use all this willpower to eat all the foods that I hate, and I was envisioning at that point drinking a freezing cold raw smoothie while sitting around a cold dark table and my family eating hot food. Like, that was my vision, and I had such a visceral reaction to doing that because that's what I'd done in the past. I thought, if I do this that way, 6 months from now, I'm gonna have gained more weight because I know that I cannot keep doing that for life. And I remember thinking, that goal of me losing the 40 pounds is so far off. But unless I put in inputs that I can actually sustain, there's no point even trying, because a year from now, I am not going to be there if this feels as hard as it's felt in the past. I told myself I have to figure this out in a different way. This has to be for life this time, because I can't keep doing the cycle of needing so much willpower, breaking that trust in myself, feeling more of a failure, and then gaining all of the weight back. And that's where everything changed. I found out about calorie density. I started eating loads of potatoes, loads of vegetables. And if you want to know more about the exact system that I use, then you can watch this video next. But everything that I was doing was now being built around habits that I could sustain long term. And within that first month, I lost 8 pounds. And I remember being so ecstatic because I'd never seen such quick results. But more importantly, I had trust in myself that I could actually keep going. What happened over that first month was the two things that I'm describing in this video. I was doing something that was actually sustainable. I was doing something that could be built into an autopilot habit, and it didn't require a ton of willpower. But even though it was easier than I'd ever done, I still didn't have trust that I could sustain it because I'd never seen myself do that in the past. That first month gave me the trust in myself because I was able to keep the promises that I had made because they were simple and easy enough to do so. And that spurred me on to continue to keep those promises for the entirety of my weight loss journey. And then now 6 years on, to have maintained that and to have built so much more through the power of habit change and trust in myself. And the catalyst for that was that initial trust. The willpower to do much more difficult things now has come from the trust that I've built in myself through those tiny consistent actions. I built evidence over time. So now when I say I want to run a half marathon, or I want to build a massive company, or I want to change hundreds of lives, or I want to reach like 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, I do have trust that I will be able to do that because I've built evidence that I can keep promises to myself. Your brain gathers evidence and trust through repetition and consistent actions over time. And that's how you create a new identity for yourself. And why this is so hard when it comes to weight loss or really doing anything long term is because you can't just do it a couple of intense times or have some one-off effort or even do something for a 3-month period like 75 hard, or like I was doing back in the day where I'd white knuckle something for a period and then gain all the weight back. You have to consistently, really for the rest of your life, do the same actions if you want to sustain the result. Just like a muscle or just like fitness. If you stop doing it, it goes fast. So how do you break this cycle and then create unshakable trust in yourself that doesn't actually rely on willpower? You need to bypass the need for willpower entirely, especially in the beginning when you have no trust in yourself and you actually have evidence that you constantly do the things that you say you won't do and don't do the things that you say that you will. You need to create the ultimate trust device, which is habits. Habits are just those repetitive autopilot actions that you no longer need willpower for. These are things like brushing your teeth that you do consistently every single day. And I want to ask you right now, like, did you need willpower to brush your teeth this morning? Did you think when you hopped in the car, hey, am I going to put my seatbelt on? Am I not? Or did you just do it because it's now habit? We want to create the same kind of trust and consistency with our actions when it comes to achieving the goals we set for ourselves. And in the beginning, it will feel a bit like willpower, which is just the action of doing what you said you were going to do when you were going to do it. But the way that we force ourselves to actually do that is we have to work with the fact that our brains are hardwired for the path of least resistance and how our brains actually form autopilot behaviors like habits in the first place. And it's not through doing very difficult things that require motivation. It's through creating environments and habits that make those behaviors our new default because they are simple enough, because they're easy enough, because they are obvious and satisfying. One of the first steps of that is to make them the path of least resistance. This is going to be your environment, setting up your environment to force behavioral change. James Clear, who is the author of Atomic Habits, says that environment is the hidden hand that shapes our behavior. And what researchers have found is that very disciplined people who appear to have a lot of willpower, actually don't inherently have more. What they typically have is a more disciplined environment, or an environment that doesn't need as much willpower. And so what this looks like is to modify an environment to make the behaviors that you want to do easier and the behaviors that you want to stop harder. So getting chips out of your home, having frozen rice you can throw together a sushi bowl in 5 minutes, not having processed food in your home, not having candy in your house, eliminating as much as possible those foods from your vicinity so that you can't actually access them. Our environment is so influential of our behavior that even something as simple as having boiled potatoes in your fridge can be the difference between eating a potato-based meal and getting into a calorie deficit to lose weight versus ordering Uber Eats. The second thing about habits is that we need to make them small enough that, especially while we're trying to build them, we don't need willpower to do them, thus creating trust because we follow through on our word. We can make tiny tweaks in our actions, but we can build from that as a base once we've built trust. When I first started to build a gym routine, I knew that the most important thing wasn't going to be the intensity of my workouts, it would be how consistent I was over years. And I made a decision that I was going to go to the gym 3 times a week. The thing that allowed me to do that, even in my worst moments, or even when I was going through insane amounts of stress or busyness, was that the only goal I had for myself was to actually show up and go to the gym 3 times a week. It wasn't to do a specific type of workout. So there were many times where going to the gym was just me walking in the front doors because that was the only requirement I set, and then doing 1 or 2 exercises. And sometimes I really only did 1. 9 times out of 10, I did do more, but by making my goals so small, I created momentum for myself and trust through action as opposed to distrust with it being much too hard or feeling too intense or overwhelming so that I couldn't do it. Because there's not really any instance, I'm never too busy where I can't drive to the gym 5 minutes away and then drive straight back. But if I tell myself that I have to do an intense hour-long workout 3 times a week, if I can't fit that in, then I'm not going to go, therefore eroding trust with myself. I've now been able to build significant muscle over the past few years and consistently work up to a 10 pull-up goal from nothing, not because of intensity, but because of consistently showing up, building trust and having that repetition over time. This brings me to the third thing that you need to do when it comes to creating habits, and that is to never be fully out. And you can see through that gym example that I had some minimum requirement of success so that I could always keep the promises to myself, even if I didn't fulfill the intention of the goal itself. So obviously I wanted to work out for an hour. I wanted to do a full workout, but I knew that if there was a reason that I couldn't do that, I could still stay consistent because the only requirement was that first step. And what this did was it allowed me to break this all or nothing behavior pattern that I had always seen up until that point. It was intensity with my diet, so much willpower, white knuckling everything, and then a binge. And I've seen this work for clients as well. I remember one client that we had in our program who decided that her minimum requirements were going to be that she ate vegetables with all of her meals. And there were times where she was eating frozen pizza and she still put a side of broccoli. Over the course of time, she was able to make small tweaks, but because she got out of this all or nothing cycle where it was either binge on pizza or a potato and broccoli meal, and instead she still stayed in an arena that she could trust by having the broccoli with her pizza, she went on to lose 40 or 50 pounds and get very consistent. She no longer has those same habits, and she tweaked it over time, but she made that decision to never be out and to do something small if she couldn't do something big. The fourth thing that we want to do is to reward the input as opposed to the output. And this is something that so many people get wrong, is that they think about rewards as when I lose X pounds, when I achieve X goal, then I will get the reward. But that doesn't confirm to your brain that you should do the inputs required to achieve said result. So instead, we want to flip this. We want to build trust in ourselves, reward the trust when we keep our promises. So if you say that you're going to put your shoes on, not even go for a walk, just put your shoes on at 5 p.m. so that you can go for a walk. Even if you don't go for a walk, high five, tick off a habit, some kind of reward, amazing, like pat on the back, good job, some kind of reward that rewards the input rather than the output. Reward the trust input or the trust rep, no matter how small. And that creates dopamine in your brain that you should continue doing those actions. This is how we build habits, i.e. how we build habits that don't rely on willpower. The fifth thing that's incredibly effective is to create pain around not actually doing the thing. And this is very important while something isn't a habit because it's not on autopilot and you don't have trust that you can follow through. So rather than relying on willpower, which you won't have until you do have trust, create what's called a commitment device, which is something that becomes more painful for you to not do the action than to do it. And I did this for YouTube for 2024. I set a goal for myself that I wanted to put out a video every single week. But in 2023, I wasn't actually doing that. Even though I had the goal, I had the identity, I wouldn't actually do it. So every time I set the goal, I eroded more and more trust. Every time I said, I'm going to get serious this time, I eroded trust because I wasn't actually doing it. I realized I needed to create pain associated with not doing it. So I set up a commitment device, which is really just anything that you put in place before you have to take the action that is going to enforce you taking the action. And so mine was that if I didn't put out a YouTube video, I had an app which is called Stick. You can use it if you want, which would automatically deduct $100 to a charity that I don't like. And I had to basically tell this app that I had done the action and I had someone else that I trust verify that I had done it. The crazy thing was that I went from not putting out YouTube videos consistently to doing one every single week because I didn't want to lose $100 to a charity that I hated. I created enough pain where the pain of taking action was less than the pain of inaction. So I didn't need willpower because I had motivation and pain. And now I have enough trust in myself because I have a year of evidence that I will create videos. So even if I miss a couple here and there, overall I'm consistent. And you can use the same when it comes to weight loss or any kind of goal that you're trying to achieve. Lastly, when it comes to building trust over time and building habits, you need to see this as almost like learning to read. And where so many people get this wrong is they will look and see influencers and they will try to model where that person is today, the inputs that they have today, the marathons, the getting up at 5 a.m., all of the things that that person is doing now, as opposed to creating trust in themselves in order for them to get there. Because that person has just put in more work than you and they are more advanced when it comes to trust, repetition, and willpower than where you are today if you have zero trust in yourself at all. So in the same way that you need to learn to read by starting with the alphabet as opposed to a Dickens novel, you need to start with something small, tiny baby steps, and then iterate over time. You go from the alphabet to little baby readers, to chapter books, to the babysitter club, and then maybe the classics like Moby Dick. But you never go from not knowing your ABCs to reading a thesis. But most of you watching are trying to do just that when it comes to your behavior. So now you know that willpower is an output from millions of tiny little repetitions and building trust in yourself over time, and then putting that on autopilot through habits. But how do you get started when you think that you can't? The answer is to just take consistent action. No procrastination, not putting it off till tomorrow, not planning another perfect diet or saying I'm gonna knuckle down on Monday when you don't even have the trust to sustain something longer than a day. You need to become someone who takes consistent action, because consistent action is the only way that you build trust. So let go of this idea that things have to be difficult, things have to be hard, and that you are going to white knuckle your way to success, because you're probably a baby when it comes to trust. So you need to start smaller. So right now, I want you to think about a big goal that you have. Maybe that's losing 40 pounds. Maybe that's starting a YouTube channel. Maybe that's building a business, something that requires a lot of willpower and a lot of repetition over time. I want you to think about the first tiny step, the one tiny input that you're going to need to do consistently in order to achieve that goal. Once you've thought of that teeny tiny action, something that you can do today, something that's going to be the first step of you building trust in yourself, put it in the comments. So create a bit of a commitment device for yourself and then go and take action on it right now. And spoiler alert, it's not going to feel good enough, because the idea of needing motivation, the idea of needing tons of action feels satisfying, because we think that we're going to see big results fast, but you're going to see so many more results, and you're going to see them much quicker when you recognize that you have to build that trust over time and make progress, as opposed to thinking you can jump there overnight. Commit to that little thing, put it in the comments, text someone, post it on social media. I don't care what you do that first. Go take action on it. Feel all the fear, all the lack of trust, and then just keep doing that thing consistently. And if you find yourself not doing it, make it smaller, make it easier, make it more obvious, and create some pain for yourself to not doing it so that you actually follow through. You cannot help but build trust in yourself when you take consistent action, no matter how tiny. And if you want more help with what to do to build day-to-day habits to get lean, then watch this video next. I'll see you next week for another video.